Our product is used on occasion to kill people.
That line wasn't a slip. It wasn't a crisis communication failure. It was a man telling you on camera exactly what his company does and not flinching. Most tech founders spend years crafting language designed to make their products sound harmless. Alex Karp spent years refusing to. He wasn't building for everyone. He was building for the people who had to make life or death decisions with incomplete information and losing. What you're about to watch is the story of how one company figured out that the most valuable thing in the 21st century wasn't a product. It was the ability to see across oceans of data that no government, no military, and no corporation could read on its own. And how, by selling that ability to the customers everyone else refused to touch, they built a moat that no competitor has been able to cross in 20 years. This is how Palantir became the invisible infrastructure of American power. The name comes from Tolkien. In The Lord of the Rings, the Palantir are seeing stones, ancient objects that let their users perceive things happening across vast distances. Kings used them, Sauron used them. The problem was that the stones didn't lie. They showed you the truth. But they also showed you only what the person on the other end wanted you to see. Thiel named the company this on purpose. Keep that in mind. Alex Karp was not supposed to run a tech company. He earned a philosophy degree from Haverford College, then a law degree from Stanford, then left for Germany to complete a PhD in social theory at Goethe University Frankfurt, where he wrote his dissertation in German, by choice, on the relationship between aggression, language, and culture. He went to Frankfurt because he wanted to understand something that had haunted him since college: how a nation that produced Beethoven and Goethe had descended into barbarism. It wasn't an academic question for him. It was a question about what civilization actually requires to survive. He didn't exactly have corporate ambitions. "I just wanted to move to Berlin and spend all day in bed," he said in a 2025 interview. No technical background, no business training, a philosophy degree and a PhD that qualified him to teach a seminar, not run a startup. He and Peter Thiel had met at Stanford, bonding as intellectual outsiders. "We argued like feral animals," Karp would later say. In 2004, Thiel called. There was a company to run. The US intelligence community was drowning as agencies were holding pieces of the same puzzle in separate, incompatible systems, legally and institutionally incapable of connecting them. The FBI and CIA, after 9/11, famously couldn't share intelligence with each other. The answer was in the data, but nobody could read it. Karp was the person Thiel trusted to navigate a world where the data was everywhere and the understanding was nowhere. The founding insight came from PayPal. PayPal had learned to find fraud in transaction data by analyzing patterns that looked like noise until a system became smart enough to map them. The founders believed the same logic applied to terrorism, to supply chains, to battlefield intelligence, to any domain where the signal was hiding in more data than any human analyst could process. What Palantir wanted to build was a tool that could see across the information silos, getting people killed. The desire was a CIA contract, not because the money was compelling, since it wasn't, but because the CIA was the only buyer on Earth who understood what Palantir was actually selling. Not software. The ability to see what no human analyst could find alone. That is information asymmetry as a weapon. The company with the best view of the data doesn't need to be the strongest, the fastest, or the most funded. It just needs to see what everyone else is missing. Silicon Valley said no. The low point came during a 2004 pitch meeting with Sequoia Capital, which is arguably the most influential VC firm in the Valley, with deep ties to Thiel from the PayPal days. The partner, Michael Moritz, spent most of the meeting doodling in his notepad. They walked out empty-handed. Kleiner Perkins passed. So did everyone else. The reason wasn't the technology. The technology was real. The reason was the customer. A generation of engineers had decided that building tools for defense and intelligence was morally off-limits. Connecting the world was the higher purpose. Selling software to the CIA was not. The irony, which Karp would spend the next 20 years pointing out, was that the same firms rejecting Palantir on moral grounds were funding companies harvesting behavioral data from hundreds of millions of users and selling it to advertisers. The moral high ground was always selective. The second opponent was subtler, the government itself. The intelligence community post 9/11 wanted better tools, but was bureaucratically incapable of adopting them. Interagency turf wars, incompatible procurement systems, institutional suspicion of any private company with visibility into classified data. It all created friction that no VC-backed startup could have survived. Palantir had to move slowly, earning trust in rooms that didn't exist officially. That friction is where first-mover advantage starts to compound. Every year a competitor stayed out of that world, the cost of entry got higher. The security clearances, the accreditations, the institutional relationships, all these things take years to build and cannot be bought. In 2004, In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm, invested $2 million in Palantir in exchange for equity. The amount was relatively small. The validation was not. Being backed by the CIA told every other national security buyer that Palantir had cleared the hardest bar in the market. Trust in that world was the only currency that mattered. And Palantir now had it. The software went into Iraq and Afghanistan. It mapped insurgent networks, traced IED supply chains, and connected data points that analysts had been staring at for months without seeing the pattern. It didn't replace the analysts, it showed them what they'd been missing. And here is where the network effects flywheel begins. Each government contract generated revenue. But more than revenue, it generated data in the form of operational failures, edge cases, and problems nobody had anticipated, which made Palantir's models sharper. Each deployment made the next contract easier to win, which generated more data, which made the next contract easier, and so on. Competitors couldn't see what Palantir was learning because the contracts were classified. They couldn't replicate the training. They couldn't even find out what problems were being solved. Then the flywheel escaped its original container. The Recovery, Accountability, and Transparency Board was tasked with overseeing hundreds of billions in stimulus spending after the 2008 financial crisis and deployed Palantir to track where the money was going. On June 18, 2010, Vice President Biden held a press conference at the White House to announce the results. He credited Palantir by name. That opened civilian government. The civilian government opened allied governments. Allied governments opened commercial enterprise. By the time corporations realized they wanted what Palantir had built, Palantir had been doing it in classified environments for 7 years. The moat wasn't a product feature. The moat was time. Karp's telos. But before the battle, you have to understand who is actually fighting it. There is an interview where Karp was asked, point blank, what drives him personally? Not the company. Him, he gave 2 answers. The gap between them tells you everything.
I think you often need a lower purpose. Like the higher purpose for me...
What's a lower purpose?
Well, I love the idea of getting a drone and having light fentanyl-laced urine spraying on analysts who tried to screw us.
He had studied why civilized societies destroy themselves. He'd read the philosophers who tried to explain how a nation of poets produced death camps. He came back from Germany with one conclusion he could not leave alone: civilizations fail not because their enemies are strong. They fail because they lose the will to defend themselves. Then came the second answer.
But the higher purpose for me was to get this nation to be the preeminent power in the world, because whatever faults we have, they're nothing like anyone else's.
Battle by 2011, Palantir's software had been linked in reporting to the operation that found and killed Osama bin Laden. The company never confirmed it. Karp never denied it. The software was used by ICE to track undocumented immigrants for deportation. By the US military in drone targeting. possibly by the Israel Defense Forces in developing targeting systems. Privacy watchdogs warned that Palantir's platform had the technical architecture to become a mass surveillance apparatus. Civil liberties organizations filed complaints. Investigative journalists ran long pieces. Karp's response was not to dial back. It was to make the argument directly. In a 2024 interview with the New York Times, Karp put it plainly, "Are we in a dangerous world where you have to invest in these things?" I come down to yes. The power of advanced algorithmic warfare systems is now so great that it equates to having tactical nuclear weapons against an adversary with only conventional ones. Alex Karp, Washington Post Silicon Valley, called him a war profiteer. He called them bystanders. Do you think a private company should hold the analytical infrastructure of the American security state, or does that kind of power belong to a government institution? By 2026, Palantir's revenue had been accelerating for 11 straight quarters. The company's clients included the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and every branch of the US military. The commercial business, the flywheel that had escaped government, was growing faster than the government side. The industry Karp had been building against for 20 years had finally caught up to the question he'd been asking since 2003. And now, everyone wanted to know the answer.
Do they get to control the weights to do it, or do you get to control the weights? Are we really going to outsource the battlefield of this country to the consensus view in Silicon Valley? That is...
Power the West to its obvious innate superiority, bring violence and death to our enemies. Alex Karp, the Technological Republic. Palantir's name comes from the seeing stones in Tolkien objects that show you the truth, but can be used to manipulate whoever holds them. Do you think Karp chose that name as a warning or as a promise? On September 30th, 2020, Palantir went public via direct listing on the New York Stock Exchange. Its stock opened at $10. Before the listing, Karp filed an S-1 with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is a legal document reviewed by lawyers, read by every institutional investor considering the stock. Most S-1s are written in the careful, measured language of corporate law. Karp wrote this: "We have chosen sides, and we know that our partners value our commitment. We stand by them when it is convenient and when it is not." 17 years after Michael Moritz doodled through their pitch, after being told the company was doomed, after operating in the classified dark while the Valley built consumer apps and social networks, Karp had turned his ideology into a prospectus. The data flywheel that started with a $2 million CIA investment was now a public asset. Anyone could buy a piece of it. Karp built Palantir to defend the West. What do you think happens to a company like this when the definition of who the West is defending against changes? Return to the higher and lower purpose. When Sorkin asked Karp about his lower purpose, first the raw answer and then the higher purpose, Karp gave both without hesitation. The gap between them is the entire company. The man who spent years in Frankfurt trying to understand why civilizations destroy themselves built a company whose entire value proposition is seeing what others can't. He sold that ability to the people who needed it most and refused, for 17 years, to apologize for it. The right question, the one he has been asking since Frankfurt, is simpler. In a world with real enemies, who do you want to have the power to see?